I feel like I have a story to tell. I hear this quite often from people when they find out that I'm a writing coach. And in today's episode of The Written Compass, I want to support you in some very clear, practical ways that you can start to tell your story, start to get your story down, and start to send it towards what might be a potential chapter or a book. So excited you're here. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. I'm super excited to be here. Another episode of The Written Compass. How are you? How are things going? How is your writing going? What are you working on? I always like to hear from people who had someone recently say, "Hey, I've been following your podcast. It's really been supporting me. I don't even know where to begin to tell you what's been going on with my words and my writing, but they have felt inspired." So what is standing out to you? What are you working on? I always want to hear. And don't forget, if you ever want to get connected and just have a really low stakes way to be in the flow of your writing, then make sure you head to our Writing as Healing community, shanahartman.com/writing as healing. And it's just a really nice way to have some support on a weekly basis for kickstarting your week, being in your writing flow. If you remember a couple of episodes ago, we talked about writing as a tool for healing, and that space is for that. And then, of course, as always, if you are ready to start to head towards a publication of some sort, whether that be contributing to one of our collaborative books or your own book in particular, we definitely want to talk to you. But in today's episode, it is all about how to tell your story. So part of what a lot of people who are just writing to write or starting to feel that tug around writing their book, they'll often say, like, I feel like I have a story to tell. I feel like I have things to share. Or I recently met someone and they were talking about how everyone they kind of run into says, man, you really need to get your story out there. People really need to hear what your life has been like and what your journey has been like. And then typically what happens after they have that initial excitement is they go on to share. They don't know where to begin. They don't even know how to start that. They certainly don't have ideas about, how would they put it in a book, and then all of the publication questions and all that good stuff. So in today's episode, I really want to kind of walk through some clear, hopefully aligned steps. You get to take what resonates and leave what doesn't on how to get your story down. And the most important thing that I think people, when they start to go, I want to tell my story, is they feel like they need to go all the way back to the beginning and like their birth story. And if you're anything like me, my mother calls me every birthday. My birthday is January 11th. I won't tell you the year I was born, but let's just say I'm Gen X for sure. And she says, depending on the time of call, right about now, I was walking around the hospital, right? And she goes into telling and retelling my birth story, which I love and adore. And I will not be writing about that. That is not where I need to begin. So a lot of people think when they tell their story, they need to start back at the beginning of their life, the beginning of, wherever the beginning means for them. And I just want to kind of lovingly, gently remove that. That's a bit of a myth, and that is not true. So where is a good place to start? So first is just remembering we want to, when you're feeling that tug to start to write things down or start to share your story, or maybe you've already been writing things down, we want to just get it down, right? Get it all down, whatever it may be. And really don't hold back. Don't censor yourself. And one day you may be writing about something in one particular part of your life. And then the next day you may be writing about something that happened, 3 minutes ago. So whether it was 15 years ago or 3 minutes ago, just continue to get it down and don't hold back. That is kind of step number one. Now, as you are beginning to write, you might start to notice, or I want to encourage you to start to notice, next step is to start to look for patterns and themes around these stories that you're sharing. So let's say I have a memory of maybe how we used to begin every soccer game when I played at East Carolina University. There were certain things and parts of that are really important to my story. And we used to do this warm-up drill. We kind of called it organized chaos, where everyone was sort of doing their own thing or in pairs, but we were all doing it together at the same time, if that makes sense. So it was organized and it was not. And that idea of organized chaos is something that has become kind of a pattern or a theme for me and how I approach a lot of things in life. And so if I'm seeing myself kind of writing some stories and I'm noticing, there's something about these things that seem to link together, then I might start to try to notice what those patterns are, right? I might start to give them a little bit of a name. Or if you're someone who's visual, a fun thing to do is to kind of color code. So maybe with my organized chaos idea, maybe I highlight those stories, and I wouldn't highlight all the words because visually that would be overwhelming to me. But you do you. I might highlight the beginning or the first couple of lines, or if I gave it a little title, I might highlight the title in, let's just say, a yellow color, right? And you might start to see, okay, there's all these yellows, there's all these greens, there's all these blues. And that might indicate some grouping that could happen where things start to form and create a little bit of shape. So first step is don't hold back, get it all down, write something, write it often. The second is to start to very loosely look for patterns and themes. And I think you can do this as you are writing. So you don't need to feel like I've written all the stories, I've shared all the things, I've done all of my experiences, they are down, and then go back. You can kind of do it. You'll start to feel it as you are writing. And then the next step and the next tip really is don't worry about chronology. Don't worry about time. This does not have to go in a chronological order. This does not have to go in a age order if that does not make sense. Now, as you are pulling things together, creating patterns, themes, and starting to group your stories and experiences, if you notice that part of that theme is, this is like early childhood or adolescence, this is early adulthood, right? This is middle age, this is later. If those make sense and those feel aligned, then certainly use that as a grouping, but it is not a have to. There are plenty of books and examples where the stories are thematized not by chronology, not by time, not by age, but simply by the lessons or the kind of overall so what that the person writing about them was experiencing at the time. And then my fourth and final tip is to really make sure you're capturing the feelings as well as the play-by-play or the what's happening. So I've talked before on this podcast about play-by-play versus color commentary, and I've kind of used the analogy of a sportscaster. And usually there's someone who gives the play-by-play and tells you, the ball went from Hartman to Smith, from Smith to Johnson, right? And tells you what is happening on the court, on the field, etc. And then usually you have the color commentary person who's giving the story, giving the details, giving the dialogue of what that player said before the game or something they noticed during the game or some historical element about them as a person. We want to ultimately, we're offering the reader an experience. We want them to feel what we want them to feel, or maybe what we were feeling in the moment. So you want to make sure as you are writing, just in terms of the type of writing and the details, is that you're capturing the feelings. It's not so much about when we say we want to tell our story, it's not so much about the play-by-play of the experience. That's important and can be powerful. But it's what happened because of that, or how we felt, or what we were experiencing, how we label that and see that now, that is really going to draw the reader in. Readers will put their own story in it. It's not that our story is exactly the same as someone else's, and maybe they've experienced, some heartbreak or tragedy in the ways that we have. But the feeling that has come from it, or what we learned from it, that's really what's going to draw the reader in. So you want to make sure you're including that. So how do we get our story down, right? First of all, letting go of the myth that you have to start at birth or some particular time in your life. It's not about that. But I want you to first, don't hold back. Get it all down. Don't censor yourself. You don't need to worry about what needs to happen or what gets included or not in the final chapter or book or whatever you are working on. Second is, as you're writing, I like to do this as I'm writing, start to look for patterns and themes that might show how these stories group together in some way. And do whatever you need to do to label those. Don't worry too much if that's an accurate label or not at this moment. Someone else can support you in that, but just start to label them and make sure you can understand your labels. And then don't worry about chronology. Don't worry about time. It doesn't have to go in order. You don't have to go sleuthing and remember, okay, and this happened in sixth grade, or this happened when I was 13, and this happened when I was 14, and so on and so forth. It's not so much about time. It's, again, about the story and the experience. And then finally, to go along with that, we want to make sure we are capturing our feelings as much, if not more so, than the play-by-play of what is happening in that particular element of our story. So these are just some simple, I hope, and practical tools on how you can start to get your story down. I'm curious what of these you have used before, or what of these are resonating with you. Which ones do you want to try? And certainly I want to hear about it. If you do try, I want to hear what worked for you, what other things you realized were important. This is not an end all be all list. These are just some things that, as we've worked with clients, as I've done my own writing, we have found very helpful and supportive in getting our story down and telling our story. So I look forward to hearing from you and seeing what resonated. As always, we want you to share this with people who you want to hear their story. So thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Written Compass. If you are enjoying this content, do me a favor and go and review the podcast. This allows me to share and get these messages out to the people who really need them, who we want to read their books in the future. You can also go and share your thoughts and tag me at @ShaynaHartman_ on Instagram. Again, this is just a way for us to get connected and share the writing love. And if you know that you are ready to write your book, that message that's been burning inside of you for a long time, then I want to talk to you. My team and I want to talk to you. Head on over to ShaynaHartman.com and click Work with Us. From there, you'll see an application to explore and see if writing your book is your next best step.